Friends, welcome back to political science class. So today we are going to see about the external relations which India had during the first 2 decades. In this chapter we are going to see the international context that shaped India's external relations and the operational principles that inform the country's foreign principles policy, and the history of India's relationship with China and Pakistan, and also about the evolution of India's nuclear policy. So for CUT UG exam, this chapter is very important. You know that there is a separate book itself. There is a second part which is there. We will be dealing with that also, which is about the contemporary world politics. But in this book, this chapter, fourth chapter, is speaking about India's external affairs relations, and this has played a very important role in the last 3 years. If we see, the questions have come from this chapter as well, so we need to be very careful reading this. And as I already told you, we have to focus mainly on the datas, the names, and which is related to the incidents which happened during that time. Let us go inside. So what was the international context at that time? You know that when India became independent and became republic in 1950, there was a devastating war and was grappling with issues of reconstruction all over the world. And establish an international body was underway. We know that UN was formed at that time, and then new countries were emerging, and twin challenges of welfare and democracy both were there. So as we have already seen in the last chapter, that we also wanted to have a welfare government, but also a democracy as well, welfare of the all people. We wanted to have social justice as well. Then we had a partition of India was there, and then poverty alleviation in India was also an important focus. So this was the context at which we need to have these international affairs and the relations which we need to build. As a nation born in the backdrop of the World War, India decided to conduct its foreign relations with an aim to respect the sovereignty of all nations. This slide is very much important because even today, India follows the same concepts here. So, respecting the sovereignty of all other nations, it is a basic principle of India's foreign policy, and to achieve security throughout the through the maintenance of peace. And this is find echo in our directive principles of state policy in our constitution as well. So constitution, article 51 speaks about this. We will see in that in the next slide. Both domestic as well as international environment influence the foreign policy of the nation. So a foreign policy is not just built by how we have the relations with the other countries, but even the domestic politics also has a relationship with that. We will see all these things in the coming slides. So article 51, directive principles of the state policy, speaks about promotion of international peace and security. So the article says the state shall endeavor to A, promote international peace and security; B, maintain just and honorable relations between nations; C, foster respect for international law and treaty obligations in the dealings of organized people with one another; and D, encourage settlement of international disputes by arbitration. So these is the directive principles in our constitution. So this has played a very important role in building our foreign policy. Even today this has an impact since it is a part of the constitution. Okay, so India will not enter into a war. Like first it will not go and invade any country. So we will use weapons only when somebody has attacked us. So we will not go on invasion also. So this is very important article. We need to know this. This can be a question for your CUET. Which article in our Indian constitution speaks about promotion of international peace and security? The answer is article 51. This is the last article in our directive principles as well. So in the period of immediately after the Second World War, so as I already told you, many developing nations chose to support the foreign policy preferences of the powerful countries. At that time, the whole world was divided into two blocks. Namely, one block was supporting the US and another block was supporting USSR. So but India chose a separate path. We will see that in our chapter. So this resulted in the division of the countries into two clear camps. One is by United States, as I told, another one is by Soviet Union. So there was an experiment called non-alignment movement. So India played a very important role in making this possible, non-alignment movement. With India, there was Egypt, there was Indonesia, and other countries were also there. So India played an important role in the making of the non-alignment movement. Shortly we called this as NAM, N-A-M. So however, the end of Cold War in the 1980s basically changed the context of international relations altogether. But for almost 40 years, non-alignment movement played a very important role in our foreign policy also, because there were so many countries from Asia as well as Africa which were part of the non-alignment movement. So that was a very good step by India. If we see, from today's context, if we see what happened at that time, we will definitely praise this non-alignment movement. So the policy of non-alignment movement, what was the backdrop? So the Indian national movement was not an isolated process. It was a part of worldwide struggle. So prior to independence itself, there was a contact between Indian national movement also with the other countries which were under colonialism. The noble ideals that inspired India's struggle for freedom influenced the making of the foreign policy. Beginning of the Cold War era, okay, this was also an issue why we went for a non-aligned movement. So in this slide we are seeing about what was the reason, what is the backdrop in which we made this non-alignment policy. Cold War started and establishment of UN was there. There was a creation of nuclear weapons as well, and the emergence of a communist China and the beginning of decolonization. So India's leadership had to pursue its national interests within the prevailing international context. Hence India thought like, if we become part of any alliance, any bloc, then our growth will not happen that way, and we could not get aid and all those things. Hence we wanted to have a neutral stand, so we started to have this non-alignment movement, and basically it helped us a lot. So what is the Nehru's role in foreign policy in those days? See, Nehru he was not just a prime minister, he had even the foreign affairs portfolio also with him. So during his tenure in 1946 to 1964, Nehru basically, he had the foreign affairs portfolio also with him. So there were three major objectives of Nehru's foreign policies. This can be a question for CUET exam. To preserve the hard-earned sovereignty, number one, no compromise, okay, in preserving the hard-earned sovereignty. Number two, to protect territorial integrity. And number three is to promote rapid economic development. So these were the three main priorities, objectives of Nehru's foreign policy. So Nehru wished to achieve these objectives through the strategy of non-alignment movement, as I told you. So he wanted to be non-aligned. So he wanted to have maintain a distance between all these two camps. But then what was happening in India? In India, some people were there, some leaders were there who thought of a different strategy. For example, leaders like Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Ambedkar also thought like we should go pro-US, because US was considered as a pro-democracy, whereas Soviet Union, they had dictatorship. So Ambedkar thought like our foreign policy should be pro-US at that time. And also you can see Bharatiya Janasangh. Bharatiya Janasangh also, it wanted to have a pro-US foreign policy, because they don't want to have a relationship with the communist. Okay, but then we know that Nehru at that time, he was a very big leader at that time. He possessed a considerable leeway in formulating the foreign policy at that time. Hence India chose the non-aligned concept. So what is the distance from two camps? Just we will see what happened at the time. So this is a flashback, like the US led NATO was there at the time. This became a separate camp, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. And Soviet led Warsaw Pact was there. So this was the two camps at that time, and India advocated a non-alignment movement. So what happened here is, in 1956, when British attacked Egypt over the Suez Canal, you know that Britain is a part of NATO. So Egypt basically attacked the Suez Canal. So India led the world protest against the neo-colonial invasion. So at that time, India was the country which led the international condemnation of the British in 1956. So but in the same year, there is a one twist here. At the same year, when the USSR invaded Hungary, India did not join its public condemnation. So even though we were part of non-alignment movement, we had relations, good relations with USSR at that time. So despite such a situation, by and large, India did take an independent stand on various international issues, and then it could get aid and assistance from members of the both the levels. So what about the relationship between India and US during that period? See, but the very interesting point is that today we have a good relationship with the US, but at that time we can see that Pakistan was a part of US-led bloc. Hence, US was not happy with India. ठीक है, तो पाकिस्तान joined the US-led military alliances. So US was not happy with what India wanted to have, like non-alignment movement. Hence there was a considerable unease in early days between India and US. So US also resented from India's growing partnership with the Soviet Union. We can see those areas in the 1950s, 60s, 70s. India had good relationship with USSR related to the space as well. So US did not like this growing relationship between India and USSR. So the Indian development strategy limited India's economic interaction with the whole world. Let us see about Afro-Asian unity. So Afro-Asian unity, India played a very important role here as well. First of all, the establishment of the contacts which took place during Nehru's era, even before the independence as well as after the independence. Okay, throughout 1940s and 50s, Nehru had been an ardent advocate of first Asian unity. So first Asian unity, and there was a conference also India convened. So under his leadership, India convened the Asian Relations Conference in March 1947, 5 months ahead of its attaining independence. So before independence itself, March 1947 itself, India convened Asian Relations Conference. So this is a strategic move at that time. So India played a huge role in Asian unity as well as in Afro-Asian unity. So you can see, you have to note this year and the month, okay, and also the places which are there here, so that you can crack this exam and questions can come from these places. Freedom from Indonesia. Another thing you can see, Indonesia was under Dutch. So India wanted to have freedom for Indonesia from Dutch. So we also supported this as well. So India convened an international conference in 1949 supporting Indonesia so that it can come out of the Dutch colonial regime. So India was a staunch supporter of the decolonization process and firmly opposed racism, especially apartheid in the South Africa. So the foreign policy, you can see, it is a brainchild of the Indian national movement. Okay, so we were against colonialism, we were against apartheid, all these things we can see. So there is a relationship between our foreign policy and also our history of independence, the independence struggle. Bandung Conference and Non-Alignment Movement. The first Afro-Asian Conference happened in Bandung. Where is Bandung? Bandung is in Indonesia in 1955. So this was basically the first Afro-Asian Conference which led to the establishment of Non-Alignment Movement. Okay, the first summit of Non-Alignment Movement held in Belgrade, which was in Serbia, in September 1961. See, there are two questions can be asked here. Which which summit happened, okay, or the Bandung Conference, which led to the the making of non-alignment movement? Okay, the answer is Bandung Conference. Okay, in 1955 it happened. But where was the first non-alignment movement meeting happened, the conference happened? It happened in Belgrade. So you should not confuse between Bandung and Belgrade. In Bandung, first Afro-Asian Conference happened, which led to the formation of non-alignment movement. Okay, so the first non-alignment movement meeting happened in Belgrade in September 1961. Nehru was the co-founder of the non-alignment movement. And there were other peoples from Indonesia. Sukarno was there. Gamal Abdul Nasser from Egypt, and also leaders from Yugoslavia was also part of it. Peace and conflict with China. This is an interesting part and very important part. Okay, the questions can come for CUT from this area. Today we will see about the interaction between India and China from the 1950s till. Okay, so then in the coming days, in the next class, we will see about India's relationship about Pakistan as well as with Bangladesh. What happened? Okay. So unlike its relationship with Pakistan, Free India began its relationship with China on a very friendly note. Okay, so India was the first country to recognize Chinese government, the communist government, after the Chinese Revolution in 1949. So why we did so? So we wanted to have very good relationship with China. So Nehru felt very strongly about this neighbor. So we didn't thought like someday China may attack us, nothing like that. So Nehru was very optimistic about China. Hence we supported the communist government as well. So Nehru thought it exceedingly unlikely that India will face any attack from China. So for a long time Chinese border was also guarded not by the army but by the paramilitary forces, not by the border security force but the paramilitary forces were there. So the joint enunciation of the Panchshil in 1954, 29th April 1954 between Jawaharlal Nehru, the Prime Minister of India, and Chinese Premier Zhou Enlai. So this was also a very important point in India-China relations. So this also led to a an image that India and China may not have any war, any aggression like that. So this also happened in 1954, immediately just 4 years after how we became republic. Okay, so India and Chinese leaders also visited each other countries. So this was the scenario. We started the relations in a very good note. So we should know that questions can come from this. You can see when was Chinese revolution happened. In 1949 it happened, and then there can be a question on Panchshil. So when was Panchshil was signed? It was in 29 April 1954. Who was the Chinese premier at that time? It was the Chinese premier Zhou Enlai. Who was the prime minister? We know that it was Jawaharlal Nehru. Let us talk about Tibet. So the issue starts basically with Tibet because before Chinese captured Tibet, okay, annexed Tibet. Tibet was an autonomous region, separate country altogether. It acted as a buffer zone between India and China. But what happened was in 1950, China took over the control of Tibet. Okay, so this was the main tension, the cause of tension between India and China. So large section of Tibetan population opposed this takeover, but India conceded China's claim over Tibet after Panchshil agreement in 1954. 4 years itself, we considered TK. Okay, so the Chinese can have it. So we said in the Panchshil agreement that India, China will not interfere in one another's internal matters. So we considered the claim, Tibetan claim. But what happened in 1959? Soon after Panchshil, within 5 years, there was a huge revolution happening within Tibet. The Dalai Lama crossed over into Indian border. So there was a huge revolution, and he was under attack at that time. His palace was under attack and sought asylum, which was also granted. But Chinese government did not like it, and it protested against giving asylum to the Dalai Lama. Even today, Dalai Lama lives in India. He has made Dharamshala, which is there in Himachal Pradesh, as his home. Today we can see there are so many Tibetan refugees are there in India, especially in Delhi, in Himachal Pradesh, Dharamshala. So the Tibetans dispute China's claim that autonomy is granted to the Tibet autonomous region. So the Chinese said to India during this Panchshil and all, like the Chinese will give autonomous to the Tibetan region. But Tibetans say there is no autonomy. So even today it is a problem. But you see in 1954 during Panchshil itself, India accepted that Tibet is a part of China. So we considered the claim. Okay, let us see very interesting part now in India-China relationship. It was Chinese invasion in 1962. So the China annexed Tibet in 1950, which was a buffer between India and China. Now what happened? The main dispute was about western and eastern and the long border, like what is there in Ladakh and also in the northeast, which is called as, at that time we called it as NEFA, Northeastern Frontier Agency, which is a part of Arunachal Pradesh. So in two areas actually the Chinese entered in 1962. First, you see, in between 1959 and 1957 and 1959, Chinese occupied Aksai Chin, which is a unbuilt and strategic road there, and China launched a swift and massive invasion October 1962. And in 1962, how they attacked basically? The first attack was 1 week, lasted 1 week, where Chinese have captured some key areas in Arunachal Pradesh. The second wave of attack came next month. Okay, in 1962. In the next month, what they did, while the Indian forces could block the Chinese advances on the western front in Ladakh, we cannot stop them in the eastern front, northeastern front, where the Chinese entered even till the Assam plains. And finally, China declared a unilateral ceasefire and its troops withdrew to where they were before the invasion began. So this was the Chinese invasion in 1962. So we could stop them in the western border in Ladakh, but we could not stop them in the northeastern frontier in Arunachal Pradesh. So the Chinese came till the Assam plains. So that was a huge blow for Nehru's foreign policy at that time. What happened after the Chinese invasion? So this dented the India's image overall in the world, because we could not stop Chinese at that time. The Soviet Union remained neutral. So that was a very big shock basically. Why? Because even though we were having this non-alignment policy, non-aligned policy, but we were somewhat close with the USSR in the industries, in the field of industry, space and all. We were having contacts with USSR, but the same Soviet Union remained silent, neutral during this Chinese invasion. So it induced a sense of national humiliation and at the same time strengthened the spirit of nationalism across India. Defense Minister V. Krishna Menon, he had to resign, and because he could not stop this, he was the defense minister V. Krishna Menon. He resigned, and for the first time in Indian democracy, that a no confidence motion was also moved against the Jawaharlal Nehru's government at that time. But it did not pass. But the first time no confidence motion was moved after the Chinese invasion. The Congress lost some of the key by-elections as well. So in the wake of China war, many leaders of what became the Communist Party of India, Marxist, were arrested for being pro-China. We have seen this in the last chapter, that communists basically divided into two. Okay, in 1964, CPI and CPIM. Okay, CPI is basically pro-USSR and CPIM, Marxists, they were pro-China. So since they were pro-China at that time, they were mostly arrested at that time in 1964 after this 1962 invasion. A challenge of national integration and political unity was also seen, because before this, basically northeast was, it was not under much control. There was huge poverty, underdevelopment at that time, and India gave more concentration there. And what happened was Nagaland was created, it was given statehood. Manipur and Tripura, though they were union territories, were given the right to elect their own legislative assemblies at that time. Today we see all the seven sisters in the northeast. Okay, they are the complete state. You have Arunachal Pradesh, a complete state, Assam, a complete state, Nagaland, Manipur, Mizoram, Tripura, Sikkim, all these were complete states. So this we made as a strategy, that we give the people the rights so that they can elect their government and feel like they belong to India. Hence we did this after 1962 invasion. So let us see V.K. Krishna Menon, who this person is. As I told you, he was the defense minister at the time. He resigned immediately after the Chinese invasion of 1962. He was a diplomat and minister, active in the Labour Party in UK between 1934 and 1947. He had to, he was even in the Indian High Commissioner. He worked in UK and later became the India's delegation to the UN as well. A Rajya Sabha MP and later Lok Sabha MP, member of the Union Cabinet from 1956 and defense minister since 1957. He was very close person, close aide to Jawaharlal Nehru. Okay, and he resigned after the India-China war in 1962. So questions can be as related to V.K. Krishna Menon also, who was the defense minister while Indo-China war take place, or Chinese invasion took place in 1962. And you can questions can be as related who was a person who was in Indian High Commissioner, as well as he was a member in Labour Party in UK, known before 1947, and later became defense minister in India. It is V.K. Krishna Menon. Okay, we will continue this chapter in the next class. We have to have now see the other relations, India-China relation and India-Bangladesh relation. So I have divided this class, the chapter 4, into two parts, because there are so many data available here and we need to focus it. Hence I have made this two parts to be continued in the next class. Thank you very much.